It was supposed to be just another peaceful afternoon at our family ranch, horses grazing, the sun dipping behind the hills, and my 10-year-old daughter running around barefoot like she always does. But peace didn't last long. Out of nowhere, the screech of a car cut through the quiet, and then came her, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, Karen. She marched right up to our fence like she owned the whole valley, pointing, shouting, and threatening to call the cops. Because my daughter was, get this, disturbing the harmony by playing on our own land. At first, I laughed. I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars rolled up our dirt road, lights flashing. I was stunned. We don't even live in her HOA. We've had this ranch for generations, long before her little suburban development even existed. But somehow, she thought she had the power to dictate what happens on our property. She told the officers she wanted my daughter banned from the ranch. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Now here's where it gets crazy. Just 3 minutes after the officers arrived, everything flipped. One simple question from one of the deputies led to something Karen never saw coming. Her smug face started to twitch, her voice got shaky. And before anyone could process what was happening, her precious HOA, the very one she used like a weapon against the whole community, started to unravel right in front of her eyes. What exactly did the deputy ask? What secret had Karen been hiding from her own neighbors? And how did her call to the cops end up backfiring so hard that the entire HOA got shut down? Stick around, you're not going to believe what happens next to understand how things arise. How things got this crazy, you need to know a little bit about Karen and her obsession with control. Her HOA isn't just any homeowners association. It's more like her personal kingdom. She's the president, the treasurer, and probably the self-appointed sheriff too. The HOA covers this small, upscale housing development that got built about 5 years ago, near the edge of our ranch. Ever since they moved in, Karen's been trying to push her rules beyond the HOA's limits. Speed bumps, noise restrictions, lawn inspections, you name it. She's tried to enforce it, even on us, and we're not even part of her neighborhood. It started small. First, she complained about the smell of our horses. Then she sent us a letter saying our barn was unsightly from her upstairs balcony. Eventually, she demanded we move our fencing back because it threw off the symmetry of her view. We ignored her, of course. Our land has been in the family for over 60 years. But ignoring Karen only seemed to make her more determined. Recently, she's been hanging around our property line more often, taking pictures, filming with her phone. She even warned my wife that things would go smoother if we joined her HOA voluntarily. We just laughed it off until the day she called the cops on our daughter. That changed everything. The moment the deputy stepped out of the car and saw where we lived, he raised an eyebrow. He asked Karen a single question. Is this property actually part of your HOA? She froze, didn't answer. The deputy pressed again. That's when something shifted in her tone. She got defensive, started muttering about extended influence zones and community oversight. But he wasn't buying it, and neither were the neighbors starting to gather behind her, listening in. Something wasn't adding up, man. Everyone could feel it. By now, a small group of neighbors had gathered near the road, whispering and exchanging glances as they watched Karen argue with the deputy. Most of them looked just as confused as we were. I recognized a few of them folks who had once apologized for Karen's behavior, saying she was just passionate about her role. But today, their faces told a different story. Something had shifted. People weren't just watching out of curiosity anymore, they were suspicious. While Karen kept dodging the deputy's question, another neighbor, Mr. Lopez, stepped forward. He's usually quiet, keeps to himself, but today he had that look, fed up and ready to speak. He cleared his throat and asked, "Is this about the dues again?" You said you needed extra funds for community security. Karen snapped back, saying it wasn't related, but that only made the crowd murmur louder. A younger couple, who had moved in just last year, mentioned that Karen had recently increased their HOA fees with no explanation. That was the first time I heard the word audit come up. Meanwhile, the deputy, clearly sensing the shift, pulled out a small notebook and started jotting things down. Karen's voice kept rising, getting sharper, less confident. My wife stood beside me, holding our daughter's hand, whispering that this might go deeper than we thought. And honestly, she was right. You see, this wasn't just about one angry HOA president overstepping boundaries. There were layers to it: conflicts about land rights, misuse of authority, and maybe even financial misconduct. The more people spoke up, the more cracks began to show in Karen's story. But still, no one knew exactly what she was hiding. Not yet. And while the deputy kept asking questions, Karen's phone suddenly started buzzing nonstop. Her face went pale. She stepped aside to answer one of the calls, muttering something about a board emergency. That's when we knew this was bigger than just a call to the cops. Something major was unraveling behind the scenes. Karen turned her back to the group as she answered the call, pacing in tight circles, her voice lowered but tense. Every few seconds, she glanced over at the deputy, then at the neighbors, like she knew something was slipping out of her grip. The rest of us stood quietly, watching this odd scene unfold. Something about it felt off, like we were all standing on the edge of a much bigger mess than we had imagined. The deputy finally asked to speak to someone from the HOA board. Karen hesitated, then handed him the phone. As he listened, his expression shifted, less confused, more focused. He asked a few short questions, gave a few nods, then hung up and looked directly at Karen. "We'll need to take a closer look at some of your HOA's documentation," he said calmly. That single sentence made Karen flinch like she'd been stung. She immediately started talking over him, throwing around phrases like confidential records, community discretion, and legal boundaries. At that moment, one of the neighbors, Mrs. Branson, who'd lived in the HOA since it was first built, stepped forward with a folder in her hand. She said she'd kept copies of all the notices and letters Karen had sent out over the past 2 years. Late fees that never made sense, rules that didn't match the bylaws, and even threats of fines that had no legal basis. She handed the folder to the deputy, and Karen's face dropped. Completely. No more yelling. No more excuses. But it wasn't just her face that changed. Everyone around her did too. The neighbors started talking louder now, asking questions, not just about the dues, but about why their road repairs had been delayed. Why the HOA's landscaping company was always the same, one known by Karen's cousin. Someone quietly added. The tension was thick. Karen looked cornered, but still trying to find a way out. And just then, another squad car pulled up. Only this time, it wasn't for us. As the second squad car rolled onto the gravel, dust kicking up behind its tires, everyone fell silent again. The deputy who had been speaking with Karen gave a small nod to the new officer stepping out. It was clear this wasn't a routine backup. This officer wasn't here for crowd control. He walked straight up to the first deputy, said a few quiet words, and then turned his attention to Karen, who suddenly looked like she'd seen a ghost. What none of us expected was what he said next. "Ma'am, we've received a request from the county regarding a possible misuse of HOA funds. You're listed as the acting treasurer, correct?" Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her hands were shaking slightly, still clutching her phone. A few neighbors gasped. One guy even muttered, "Wait, this is real?" Turns out someone had already filed a complaint with the county weeks ago. An anonymous tip about strange financial activity tied to Karen's HOA accounts. The landscaping company owned by her cousin, Apparently, it had been billing thousands more than the going rate. And those new community surveillance cameras she installed? No one had ever seen a feed from them, and the so-called security company didn't even have a business license. The second officer explained they weren't making arrest seed, but they were beginning an official inquiry. That word alone sent a buzz through the crowd. Inquiry. Everyone knew what that meant. Audits, tedious paperwork, and a whole lot of questions Karen didn't want to answer, as neighbors began pulling out their phones to take photos and videos. Karen suddenly changed her tune. She started whispering to a few of them, trying to smooth things over, claiming everything was a misunderstanding. But no one was buying it. The same neighbors she once bossed around were now closing ranks, comparing stories, and digging up old emails and letters. And as the officers started collecting names and contact info, one woman quietly asked, "Did anyone check who actually signed the HOA checks?" That's when the real panic started to show on Karen's face. Karen's silence said everything. Her eyes darted between the crowd, the folder of evidence now in the deputy's hands, and the second officer calmly making notes. The tension was at a breaking point. That's when Mr. Lopez, who had been quiet after his earlier comment, stepped up again. He looked straight at Karen and said, "You forged my signature on that last HOA budget report, didn't you?" You could hear a pin drop. Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. No denial. Number? Outrage. Just that same shaky breath she'd been holding since the officers arrived. The deputy looked at Mr. Lopez. "You're on the board?" he asked. Mr. Lopez nodded. "At least I thought I wasn't till I saw documents I never signed." "That was it?" The deputies asked Karen to hand over her phone and step aside to speak privately. She was still technically not under arrest, but from the way they handled her firm but comment was clear this wasn't going to end quietly. While they walked off, the neighbors huddled together, sharing details, piecing things together like a puzzle they hadn't even realized was missing pieces. Overcharged dues, fake fines, made-up rules. Forged board approval zit was all right there under their noses. Then came the final twist. Mrs. Branson, who'd been digging through her own files at home, came rushing back with an old copy of the HOA's founding charter. She flipped to the last page and pointed to something no one had noticed before, an expiration clause. The HOA's legal charter had technically expired 6 months ago. No one had renewed it, which meant, legally, the HOA had no standing. All of Karen's recent actions, enforcing rules, collecting money, calling herself president, completely void. The realization spread like wildfire. People started cheering. Others just shook their heads in disbelief. Karen's grip on the community wasn't just broken, it was gone. The HOA wasn't just under investigation, it was officially shut down. And as for us, we stood on our porch, daughter in hand, watching it all unfold peacefully. This time, in the days that followed, the neighborhood slowly returned to what it should have always been: peaceful, respectful, and drama-free. The county officially confirmed that the HOA's charter had lapsed, and with it, Karen's authority vanished overnight. The investigation into the forged signatures and suspicious finances moved forward quietly, and while no charges had been made public yet, let's just say Karen hasn't been seen pacing around our ranch fence since. A few neighbors stopped by to thank us not just for standing our ground that day, but for unintentionally helping uncover what they'd been too nervous to question. Turns out, a lot of them had felt trapped under Karen's rules, but didn't know they had the right to speak up. That moment in front of our ranch changed things for everyone. Mr. Lopez and Mrs. Branson are now working with a group of homeowners to build a more honest, voluntary neighborhood council, one that focuses on community, not control. No more surprise fines, no more fake rules. just real people looking out for each other. As for our daughter, Jay's back to playing barefoot in the grass, chasing our dogs across the pasture. No more threats, no more drama. Just a childhood the way it's meant to be, free. This whole thing started with a call to the cops over a little girl playing on her own land, and it ended with the shutdown of a broken system. It was a reminder that standing up, even when it seems small, can have a ripple effect way bigger than you imagine. And if you ever find yourself dealing with someone like Karen, just remember, truth has a way of showing up, especially when a community decides it's time. Thanks for sticking around. We'll see you in the next story.